of the blizzard. The entry is in my handwriting. I know it's mine because of the way I loop my lowercase d's, a tight backward curl my wife once said looked like a man holding his own leash. The timestamp reads 1800 hours, January 14th. Temperature 22.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Wind northwest at 38 knots. Visibility 1/8 of a mile. Barometric pressure 29.42 inches and falling. Every number is correct. I checked them against the instruments bolted to the observation shelter outside, brushing caked snow off the thermometer housing with fingers I could barely feel, reading the mercury twice, because the first time I was sure the cold was doing something to my eyes. 22.6. Northwest at 38. Visibility damn near zero. All correct. All matching the entry already written on the open page. All impossible, because the timestamp says 1800 hours 6 in the evening, and when I walked through the door of Halloran Station with my duffel bag over one shoulder and ice in my beard, it was 2:11 in the afternoon. Someone had already taken my readings, in my handwriting, 4 hours before I would have taken them myself. Let me be precise about this. Precision is the only currency I have left. If I stop spending it, I don't think I'll know who I am anymore. And after what happened at Halloran Station, after what is still happening at Halloran Station right now, in a blizzard that has no business being as deep or as old as it is, knowing who I am is the one thing I'm not willing to let go of. My name is Tom Vasick. I'm a highway maintenance supervisor for the Montana Department of Transportation, District 7. I've held the post for 11 years. I'm also a certified cooperative observer for the National Weather Service Observation Station. CO-7741, Halloran Pass, elevation 7,847 feet, at the summit of the most godforsaken stretch of Highway 191 between Bozeman and the Idaho line. Halloran Station is not a place people want to go. It's where they send you, or in my case, where you volunteer for when your wife moves out of your house and your supervisor asks if you're doing okay, and you can't think of a single honest answer that wouldn't make him pull you off the road crews. So you say you're fine, and then you raise your hand for the job? Nobody wants the 72-hour manual watch at the summit station during the worst forecasted blizzard in 9 years, because the automated instruments went dark 48 hours ago, and somebody has to drive up and be their replacement. You have to take readings every 3 hours, log them, radio them down to the forecast office, monitor the road conditions for the plowing crews, keep the generator running, keep the access road flagged, keep the observations clean. I'm good at keeping things clean. Ellen, that's my wife. Or the woman who was my wife until the papers go through, she said that was the problem. She said I kept things so clean there was no room left for mess. And mess is where people live. She said I loved my logbook more than I loved her. I told her that wasn't true. I think about that conversation a lot now, sitting in this room with people I can almost see, writing entries I've already written, while the blizzard outside turns into something that isn't weather anymore. I think she might have been right. I need to go back to the morning of January 14th, when I loaded my truck at the District 7 yard in Whitehall and started the drive up. The forecast was already bad. The NWS office in Great Falls had issued a blizzard warning for the northern Gallatin Range, effective 1800 hours, with accumulations of 2 to 3 feet expected above 6,000 feet and sustained winds in the 50 to 60 knot range. The models were in agreement for once, which is never comforting. When every model agrees, it means the storm is too big for any of them to be wrong about. Mike Deering, he's the district supervisor. My boss had put out the call 2 days earlier. Someone needed to staff Halloran for the duration. The automated surface observation system up there, the ASOS unit that normally feeds temperature, wind, pressure, and precipitation data to the NWS every minute, had gone down on the 12th. A power surge took out the data logger, and the tech who was supposed to drive up and swap it got rear-ended on E90 and was in the hospital with 2 cracked vertebrae. The replacement unit wouldn't arrive for 5 days. The blizzard would arrive in 2. So someone had to sit up there and be the instruments. I'd done it before. Twice, actually once in 2019, and once in 2021, both routine winter storms that dumped about 14 inches and blew themselves out in under 30 hours. Easy shifts. You drive up, you hunker down. You take your readings, you radio them in. You eat canned soup and read a paperback and wait for the plows to punch through. It's the closest thing to peace I've ever found in a job. Halloran Station is a small complex, and I use that word generously. There's a main building, a single-story concrete block structure from 1968, with an office, a bunk room, a kitchen, and a bathroom. It was built as a highway maintenance relay point, back when the state still kept crews stationed at the summit during storm season. Attached to it is a 3-bay garage that houses a backup generator, a snowblower, and whatever else needs to be out of the wind. About 50 feet east of the main building sits the instrument shelter, a white-painted Stevenson screen on a post, housing the thermometers and the hygrothermograph. The anemometer and wind vane sit on a 10-foot tower bolted to the roof. The precipitation gauge stands on its own post, shielded from the wind by a standard altar shield. It's not much, but it's orderly. The instruments go where they go. The readings happen when they happen. Everything has a position, and the position has a purpose, and the purpose has a number, and the number goes in the logbook. I loved it up there. Let me say that plainly because it matters later. I loved it. Not the cold, not the isolation, those were just conditions. I loved the clarity, the absolute absence of ambiguity. At Halloran Station, you either took the reading or you didn't. The number was either right or it was wrong. There was no interpretation, no argument, no standing in the kitchen at midnight while your wife tells you she's been lonely for 6 years, and you realize you don't know how to answer because loneliness is not a unit of measurement you were ever taught to read. The drive up took just under 3 hours. Highway 191 climbs out of the valley south of Bozeman, follows the Gallatin River for a while, then cuts west at the Branham Creek Junction and starts switchbacking up toward the pass. The last 20 miles are unpaved in summer and barely plowed in winter. I was in my personal truck, a 2018 F250 with chains on all four, and the snow was already 8 inches deep on the road by the time I passed the 6,000-foot marker. The sky was the color of old concrete. The trees on either side of the road were dense lodgepole pine, their branches sagging under fresh accumulation, so heavy that some of the lower limbs were touching the ground. The wind was gusting hard enough to rock the truck on the steeper grades. I had the radio on, not music, the NOAA, a weather radio out of Great Falls, which was broadcasting the blizzard warning on a loop. I listened to it 3 times. The phrasing didn't change. Warnings never do. That's what makes them trustworthy. I reached the Halloran Station access road at 1:47 p.m. The access road is a quarter-mile spur off 191, gated with a chain-link swing gate that takes a DOT key. I got out, unlocked it, drove through, got out again, locked it behind me. The wind hit me like a fist both times. My breath froze in my beard instantly. The air had that quality it gets above 7,000 feet in a storm, thin and metallic, like breathing through a screen door. The station appeared out of the snow like a photograph developing in reverse. First the roof, then the walls, then the dark rectangle of the garage doors. The instrument shelter was a white smudge against the white ground, almost invisible. The anemometer on the roof was spinning hard enough to hum. I pulled up to the main building and parked with the truck's nose facing downhill, the way you're supposed to, in case you need to leave in a hurry. I remember being careful about that. Procedure. I grabbed my duffel and the 2 boxes of provisions from the truck bed. Canned goods, coffee, batteries, the handheld VHF radio, a rolled-up sleeping bag, and fought my way to the door. The keypad lock took my code on the second try. My fingers were already stiffening. The door opened onto the office, small room, maybe 12 by 15. A metal desk against the far wall, an old oak office chair, a set of filing cabinets, a wall-mounted barometer, a clock. The clock was the first thing I checked. 2:11 p.m., right on schedule. A propane heater against the north wall, currently off, the room sitting at maybe 40 degrees. A doorway on the left led to the bunk room and kitchen. A doorway on the right led to a short hall and the garage. Everything was in order. The desk was clean. The filing cabinets were closed. The barometer was reading 29.71 inches, which matched my truck's gauge to within 100th. The chair was pushed in, and the logbook was open. It sat on the center of the desk, a black cloth-bound book, standard NWS Cooperative Observer issue. Not new, the cover was softened with age. The spine cracked and re-cracked 100 times. This was the station's primary log. Inside were years of weather observations, date, time, temperature, humidity, wind speed and direction, pressure, precipitation, sky condition, remarks. Every entry in blue or black ink, every entry signed or initialed by the observer on duty. The logbook was open to a page near the middle. The most recent entry sat about 2/3 of the way down. I set my bags on the floor and leaned over the desk to read it, the way I'd read 1,000 entries before. Professional reflex. You check the log first. It's how you know where you are in the sequence. The entry read, January 14th, 1800. Temp, 22.6 degrees Fahrenheit, WN, DNU 38 knots, VIS 1/8 of a mile. Barrow 29.42 inches. Falling sky OVCPCPNSN Conti RMKS. Blizzard conditions established. Road impassable above MM47. All automated instruments non-functional. Manual OBS continuing on schedule. Below that, in the initials box, TV Thomas Vasick. My initials. I looked at the clock. 2:11 p.m. I looked at the entry. 1800 hours. I walked outside back into the wind, across 50 feet of horizontal snow to the instrument shelter, and opened the little white door and read the thermometer and read it again. 22.6 degrees Fahrenheit. I checked the anemometer readout on the portable display clipped to my belt. Northwest at 38 knots. I went back inside and stood over the logbook and read the entry one more time. My handwriting, my initials, my numbers, written 4 hours into my future. And beneath the entry, a single line I hadn't noticed the first time, in the same hand, so small I had to bend close to read it. Day 1. I did what any reasonable person would do. I found an explanation. The previous observer, whoever had staffed the station last, probably during the December storm, must have had handwriting similar to mine. It's not that unusual. Government-trained observers tend to develop the same tics. You learn to print in a specific way for legibility. The 7s get crossed, the Ds get looped. It's institutional muscle memory. And the initials TV could stand for plenty of things. Travis something, Tyler something. It didn't have to be me. The data was another matter. 22.6 degrees, northwest at 38. Those numbers describe the conditions outside right now at 2:11 p.m. But they were time-stamped at 1800. Coincidence? Maybe. Weather at Halloran Pass during a storm can hold steady for hours. The same reading at 2 o'clock and 6 o'clock isn't impossible. It's not even particularly unusual. Blizzards are monotonous by nature. The wind picks a direction and stays there. The temperature finds a basement and sits in it. I told myself all of this while I lit the propane heater and waited for the room to climb past 50 degrees. It took about 20 minutes. I used the time to unpack my provisions, stow my gear in the bunk room, check the generator 3/4 tank of diesel, good for about 60 hours on automatic load, and make a pot of coffee on the 2-burner propane stove. The coffee was the second wrong thing. The pot was already warm, not hot, not freshly brewed, but warm in the way a pot is warm when it held coffee an hour ago, and someone rinsed it and set it back on the burner but didn't dry it all the way. There was a heat memory in the metal, a residue. I held my hand over the burner, cold. The burner hadn't been lit, but the pot was warm. I set it down, refilled it with water from the tap. The station has a well and an electric pump that runs off the generator, and put it on the flame. I stood there watching it heat because I didn't want to look at the logbook again just yet. Here is what I told myself. Someone had been here recently. An inspector, maybe. A lineman who needed shelter. Someone had stopped in, made coffee, left. The DOT key isn't a rare item. Half the maintenance crew has one. Someone had been here, used the pot, and gone. And maybe that someone had handwriting like mine and initials like mine and knew the observation protocol well enough to take a reading and log it. I told myself that, and I didn't believe it. But I wrote it in my head the way I'd write it in a report. Clean, logical. The kind of explanation that closes a paragraph, and I moved on. My first official observation cycle was at 1500 hours, 3 o'clock. Standard operating procedure for cooperative observers is to take readings at 3-hour intervals during storm events. 0000, 0300, 0600, 0900, 1200, 1500, 1800, 2100. You go out to the instrument shelter, read the thermometers, check the precipitation gauge, record the wind, note the sky conditions, come back in, and write it down. By 1500, the storm had settled into its rhythm. The wind was steady from the northwest, a constant roar punctuated by gusts that made the building groan in its joints. Snow was falling at about an inch an hour, driven nearly horizontal by the wind. Visibility had dropped to a quarter mile. The world outside the window was a gray-white wall of motion, and the station sat in it like a stone in a river. I suited up parka, insulated overalls, gaiter, goggles, gloves, and went out. The door fought me. The snow between the main building and the instrument shelter was already knee-deep in the drifts, though the wind-scoured areas were down to bare gravel. I waded through it, head down, following the flagged rope that runs between the building and the shelter. This rope is the most important piece of infrastructure at Halloran Station, and it's literally a piece of nylon cord with orange tape tied to it every 10 feet. In a whiteout, it's the difference between finding the instruments and walking off the edge of the mountain. I reached the shelter, opened the door, and read the thermometer. 22.6 degrees. I stood there for a long moment with the wind hammering my back, staring at the mercury. Then I checked the maximum-minimum thermometer, the U-shaped dual-column unit that records the highest and lowest temperatures since the last reset. It had already been reset. This is important. The max-min thermometer works on a simple principle. Mercury pushes 2 small steel index markers to the extremes of its travel. When you reset it, you use a magnet to pull the markers back down to the current temperature. It's a manual operation. You have to physically hold the magnet to the glass and draw the markers down. It can't be done remotely. It can't be done by accident. Someone had reset the max-min thermometer since I'd arrived. The markers were sitting flush at 22.6, a clean reset, a fresh start for the observation cycle. But I hadn't reset it. I'd been inside making coffee and unpacking. I hadn't touched the instrument shelter since I'd come out to verify the logbook entry 20 minutes ago. And when I'd verified the entry, I'd read the thermometer, but I hadn't reset the max-min. I hadn't touched the magnet. I was sure of that. Someone else had. The wind screamed around the shelter. I closed the little white door, latched it, and fought my way back to the building. Inside, I pulled off my gloves and stood over the logbook and stared at the entry that couldn't be mine. Day 1. I picked up the VHF radio and called dispatch. Whitehall Base, this is Halloran Station. Over. Static for 5 seconds. Then Mike Deering's voice, scratchy but recognizable. Halloran, Whitehall. Go ahead, Tom. Mike, who was up here last, before me? A pause. Last staffed observer was you, Tom. December of 21. The regular inspections are... No, I mean recently. Last few days. Anybody come up to check the ASOS unit? Negative. Jake was supposed to, but he's in the hospital. That's why you're up there. Nobody's been on that spur road since the snow started. Why? I looked at the logbook. No reason, just checking. The access road looked like it hadn't been plowed. It hasn't. You're the first up there in at least 2 weeks. Everything okay? Everything's fine. I'll have my 1500 observation for you in a few minutes. Copy that. Stay warm, Tom. This one's going to be a son of a bitch. He wasn't wrong. I signed off and sat down in the oak chair. The seat was warm. Not warm from the heater, The propane had only been going for 40 minutes, and the chair was against the far wall, 15 feet from the unit. This was body heat warm, the kind of warm a chair holds when someone has been sitting in it for a while and has just stood up. I got up, I looked at the chair, I touched the seat with my palm. Warm, undeniably warm. And now I'll admit something I'm not proud of. I sat back down. I sat down because the chair was warm, and the room was still only about 55 degrees, and my hands were shaking and the warmth felt good. I sat down and I opened the logbook to a fresh line, and I wrote my 1500 observation in my best hand. January 14th, 1500. Temp, 22.6 degrees Fahrenheit. WND NW 37 knots. VISS 1/4 mile, Barrow 29.64 inches falling sky. OVC PCPN SNHBYRMKS. Station staffed 1411. All manual OBS per SOP. ASOS INOP. I signed it. TV. I looked at my entry and then I looked at the entry above it, the one that was already there when I arrived, and I compared the handwriting. They were identical. Not similar, not close, identical. The same pressure on the pen, the same spacing, the same tight backward curl on every lowercase d. The cross on the 7 in 37 KT was at the same angle as the cross on the 7 in 38 KT in the entry above it. I turned the page. What I found on the next page is when things stopped being strange and started being something else entirely. The next page had 3 entries on it. Timestamp 2100 on January 14th, 0000 on January 15th, and 0300 on January 15th. All in my handwriting, all signed TV, all with weather data I hadn't collected yet, for hours that hadn't happened yet, during a blizzard that was still building outside the window. And at the bottom of the 0300 entry, that same small notation. Day 1. I checked the clock. 3:24 p.m. The 2100 entry was timestamped for 6 hours from now. The entries described conditions I couldn't verify because they hadn't occurred yet. I could have closed the logbook. I want to be clear about that. I could have closed it and put it in the filing cabinet and used a fresh notebook for my own observations and not looked at it again. Nobody would have blamed me. Nobody would have known. But I'm a man who reads logbooks. It's what I do. It's who I am. And a logbook with entries in my handwriting for times that haven't happened yet, that is a discrepancy. And discrepancies have explanations, and I find explanations. That is my job and my nature. And, if I'm being honest, it's the reason my marriage is over. I turned back to the earlier pages. The logbook at Halloran Station goes back decades. It's the same physical book, or at least the same style, black cloth-bound, unlined with numbered pages. The station has been a cooperative weather observation point since 1961, but this particular logbook started in 1974, when the NWS standardized the cooperative observer format. Page 1 bore a header in block letters. Halloran Pass. Cooperative Observer Station CO-7741. Elevation 7,847 feet. Log of weather observations and station operations. The entries from the 70s and early 80s were sparse. Most of the time, Halloran was unstaffed. Observations were taken by whoever was doing road maintenance at the summit, which in those days meant a crew that drove up twice a day during storm season and then went home. You could see it in the handwriting, different hands, different inks, different levels of care. Some entries were meticulous, some were barely legible. The first full blizzard deployment I could find was January 1978, a man named Frank Hargrove. He signed his entries, FWH, had been sent up for what the dispatch log described as a 72-hour watch. His entries started normally enough. Standard observations, clean data, professional notations, temperature, wind, visibility. He noted the road conditions and the generator status and the propane level. He remarked on the snow accumulation and the direction of the drifting. He was thorough. He was careful. He was the kind of person who belonged up here. His last entry was timestamped 0600, January 20th, 1978. Day 3 of the storm. The weather data was unremarkable 18 degrees, northwest at 44 knots, 0 visibility. Heavy snow. What caught my eye was the remarks column. RMKS. Heard someone at the instrument shelter at 0545. Went to check. No one there. Footprints in the snow to the shelter and back to the building. Not mine. Boot tread is different. Checked all rooms. Station is empty. I am alone here. Leaving this note for the record. Below that, Day 1. That was his last entry. The next entry in the logbook was dated February 3rd, 1978. 2 weeks later, in a completely different hand. Station inspected per district order. Observer Hargrove not present. Personal effects remain. Truck in garage. No sign of departure. All instruments in working order. Logbook recovered and filed. Recovered and filed. As if the logbook were evidence. I went through the pages carefully after that. Not every entry was interesting. There were years of routine observation, summer readings taken by visiting inspectors, fall maintenance notes, unremarkable storm deployments, where the observer stayed 3 days and left, and that was that. But the blizzards, the real blizzards. I started flagging them mentally, looking for the pattern, and the pattern was there. It was always there. In March 1985, an observer identified only as DKS was deployed for a severe storm. His entries ran for 31 hours before stopping. His last remark, "Coffee was made when I woke up. Did not make coffee. Am alone." Day 1. In February 1991, Dale Swenson, DSW, took the winter watch. His entries were more detailed than Hargrove's, full of specific instrument readings and meticulous sky observations. A careful man. A man after my own heart. He lasted 41 hours. His remarks column grew increasingly agitated over the course of those hours. 0300. RMKS. Wind steady. Checked anemometer for ice buildup. Functioning normally. 0600. RMKS. Found instrument shelter latch undone. I latched it at 0300. Relatched. 0900. RMKS. Max min has been reset. I did not reset it. Previous max/min values lost. 1200. RMKS. Entry below is not mine. And below his 1200 entry, there was another entry. Same timestamp, same weather data, slightly different handwriting. As if someone else had been taking the exact same reading at the exact same time and writing it in the same logbook. Below both entries in Swenson's hand. Who else is reading this? That was his last entry. The follow-up inspection, dated March 8, 1991, used language I was starting to recognize. Observer not present. Personal effects remain. No sign of departure. All instruments in working order. Logbook recovered. I kept reading. I couldn't stop. The pattern was braided through the logbook like a wire through a cable, invisible until you pulled at it, and then impossible to unsee. In January 1996, observer PST lasted 26 hours. His final remark, "The chair is always warm." In December 2003, Margaret Chen MC was deployed for a major blizzard. Her entries were the most detailed I'd found. She was an atmospheric scientist, not just a maintenance worker. Her observations included cloud-based estimates, precipitation rates, calculated from gauge readings, and pressure tendency annotations that went well beyond the standard cooperative observer protocol. She was brilliant. She was meticulous. She wrote in a tiny, precise hand with a mechanical pencil, and you could see the quality of her mind in the density of her data. Her entries ran for 53 hours, the longest of any blizzard observer in the logbook. I read every one of them. Somewhere around hour 30, her remarks shifted. 0300. RMKS. I can hear someone taking readings, footsteps to the shelter and back. I went out and watched from the door. The shelter door opened by itself. Or seemed to. I think there was someone there. The snow makes it hard. But the motions were correct, the right sequence: open, read, close, latch, They knew the procedure. Mo 600 RMKS. The logbook had a new entry when I came back from the shelter. Same timestamp as mine. Same data to the 10th of a degree. Different pen. I tore the page out. I should not have done that. But I was afraid of what it meant for the data integrity. 900 RMKS. There are pages stuck together near the back of the logbook. I tried to separate them. Under the first stuck page, there are entries from 1978. Under those, entries from what looks like 1965 or 1966. The same dates, the same readings. I think the logbook is deeper than it looks. 1200 RMKS. I am being very careful about what I write here because I think the logbook keeps what you give it. I found an entry in my handwriting from 3 hours from now. The data is accurate, I checked. I don't know how to report this. I don't think there is a field on the form for this. 1500 RMKS. I've decided not to take the 1800 reading. 1800 RMKS. I took the 1800 reading. I don't remember going outside. Below that, in the same tiny handwriting, but shakier. Day 1. And then nothing. Margaret Chen's entries stopped. The follow-up inspection March 2004. Used the same language as all the others. Observer not present. Personal effects remain. All instruments in working order. Logbook recovered. I closed the book. I sat in the warm chair in the 55-degree room, and I listened to the wind, and I felt something I don't have a professional vocabulary for. Not fear, exactly. Fear has an object. You're afraid of something specific. This was more like the moment in a long drive when you realize you've been going the wrong direction for an hour, and the road behind you has quietly erased itself, and the GPS shows you in a place that doesn't have a name. The clock on the wall said 4:48 p.m. I had an hour and 12 minutes until my 1800 observation. The one that was already written in the logbook. The one that was already correct. I used the time to do something I probably shouldn't have, which was to separate the stuck pages. Margaret Chen was right. Near the back of the logbook, there was a section maybe 20 pages where the sheets were fused together. Not glued, not deliberately sealed. More like the paper had gotten wet at some point and dried while pressed flat, bonding the pages at their edges. Or maybe not wet, maybe something else. The pages felt normal dry, slightly stiff with age, but they resisted separation the way skin resists a Band-Aid. You could feel them wanting to stay closed. I worked a corner free with the tip of my pocket knife, moving slowly, trying not to tear anything. The first stuck page came apart with a soft crackling sound, like ice fracturing in a quiet room. Underneath was another page of entries. Same format, same columns, same station designation, different year. The header date was January 1978, Frank Hargrove's blizzard. But these entries weren't in Hargrove's handwriting. They were in a hand I didn't recognize, older, more formal, with a backward slanting European style that looked like it belonged in the 1950s or 1960s. And the dates were the same as Hargrove's, January 18th, 19th, 20th. The same storm, the same readings, written by someone else, in a different decade. I separated another page. Under the 1978 layer, there was a 1966 layer. Under that, something so faded I could barely read it, a pencil-written set of observations that might have been from the early 1960s, before the logbook's official start date. The paper was older, yellower, and the pencil had been soft, a thick, dark line that smudged where a thumb had rested. The logbook was a palimpsest, layers of entries stacked on top of each other, all for the same storm dates, all recording the same weather from the same instruments at the same station. Different observers, different decades, same blizzard. I don't mean similar blizzards. I mean the same blizzard. The temperature readings matched, not approximately to the 10th of a degree. The wind speeds varied by 1 or 2 knots, which is within the margin of a visual anemometer reading taken by different eyes. The pressure readings were identical to the 100th of an inch. The sky conditions were the same. The visibility was the same. The precipitation type and intensity were the same. Every blizzard at Halloran Station was the same blizzard. Or, more precisely, there was only one blizzard. And it had been running continuously under the surface of ordinary time since the station began. Each new deployment didn't encounter a new storm. It encountered the storm, the only storm, playing itself out again for the next observer, producing the same data, requiring the same meticulous attention. I sat with that for a long while. I turned it over in my mind the way you turn a part you've pulled from a machine, looking at it from every angle, trying to figure out where it goes. I couldn't make it fit. Weather doesn't repeat. Blizzards don't produce identical conditions across decades. Thermometers drift. Instruments are replaced. The observation environment changes. Nothing about 1966 would produce the same readings as 2003. Unless the readings weren't about the weather. I was still sitting there when the radio came to life. Not my handheld VHF. The base radio, an older unit mounted on the wall above the desk. A Motorola two-way that I hadn't turned on because I was using the handheld. The base unit was plugged in but powered down. Its channel selector was set to the old DOT dispatch frequency, 163.250 megahertz, a channel that hadn't been actively used since the department switched to the 800 megahertz trunk system in 2008. The radio turned on by itself. The green power light lit up. The speaker hissed with static. And then a voice came through it. Clear, professional, male, mid-range with the flat vowels of a northern Montana accent. Whitehall Base, this is Halloran Station. Over. Reporting 1800 observation. Temperature 19.8. Wind northwest at 42 knots, gusting 5.5. Visibility 00. Barometric pressure 29.38. Falling. Heavy snow, blowing and drifting. Road impassable above mile marker 47. All instruments functional. Halloran Station out. The transmission ended. The static continued for a few seconds, then the radio shut itself off. The green light went dark. I didn't move. The voice had used proper observation format, proper radio protocol, proper data delivery. And the data it reported 19.8 degrees, northwest at 42. Was close to what I was seeing outside, but not identical. A few degrees colder, a few knots stronger, a slightly lower pressure. What stopped my breath was the timestamp. The voice said 1800 observation. It was 5:16 p.m. The 1800 observation was 44 minutes away. And the numbers didn't match the entry already written in my logbook. That entry said 22.6 degrees, not 19.8. That entry said 38 knots, not 42. Two different 1800 observations. Two different sets of data for the same station at the same time. Unless they weren't at the same time. Unless the voice on the radio was reporting the 1800 observation for a different January 14th. A different year's version of the same blizzard. I picked up the handheld and called dispatch. Whitehall Base, Halloran Station. Go ahead, Halloran. Mike, did you just receive an observation report from the station on the old frequency? Negative, Tom. We don't monitor 163.250 anymore. That frequency's been dead for 15 years. You're coming through on 860.4375. Why? I just picked up a transmission on the base radio. Someone was reporting weather data from Halloran Station. A longer pause. Tom, there's nobody else up there. That base radio hasn't been keyed in a decade. Are you sure it wasn't bleed over from a commercial frequency? It was on the DOT channel. It used proper format. It identified as Halloran Station. Mike was quiet for a moment. I could hear the dispatch room behind him, phones ringing, other voices, the hum of a functioning office full of people who were not alone at the top of a mountain in a blizzard that might not be a blizzard. Could be atmospheric ducting, he said. Storm conditions bounce signals around in weird ways. I'd ignore it, Tom. You've got enough to worry about up there. How's the weather? Bad and getting worse. Get your 1800 reading and radio it in, and try to get some sleep if you can. The forecast just extended the warning through Friday. Through Friday. Mike, that's 3 more days. I know, we're trying to get a plow up to you, but the avalanche danger on the switchbacks is too high right now. Sit tight. You've got provisions? I've got provisions. Then you're fine. Halloran Station standing by. Whitehall base out. I set the radio down. I was not fine. But I didn't have a vocabulary for what I was, so I defaulted to the one thing I understood. Procedure. I waited until 1800 hours. I suited up. I went outside. The storm was fully established now. The sky was gone, not dark exactly, but absent, replaced by a churning gray-white mass that started at the roofline and extended in every direction without horizon or limit. The wind had settled into a steady 40-knot blow that made standing difficult and hearing anything impossible except the roar itself. The snow was driving horizontally, stinging where it hit exposed skin above the gator line, accumulating on my goggles faster than I could wipe them. The temperature had dropped. I could feel it in the bridge of my nose, in my earlobes, in the way my lungs seized with each breath. I followed the flag rope to the instrument shelter. My footprints from the 1,500 observation were already filled in, erased completely, as if I'd never walked this path. But there were other depressions in the snow, faint, half-filled, the shape of boot prints heading the same direction toward the shelter and back. Not mine. The tread pattern was wrong. I know my own boot prints the way I know my own handwriting. I opened the shelter door and read the thermometer. 22.6 degrees, not 19.8 like the voice on the radio had reported. 22.6 like the entry already written in my logbook. I checked the max-min thermometer. It had been reset again since my 1500 visit. The markers sat flush at 22.6, a clean reset. I had reset it at 1500. Someone had reset it again between then and now. The magnet was still clipped to the side of the shelter frame, hanging from its little chain, swinging slightly in the wind. I noted the wind northwest at 38 knots, exactly matching the logbook in the visibility, which I estimated at 1/8 of a mile. I checked the precipitation gauge, 4.3 inches of new accumulation since my last reading. Every single number matched the pre-written entry, every single one. I went back inside, snow-blind and shaking, and sat down at the desk and looked at my logbook entry, the one that had been there when I arrived, in my handwriting, 4 hours before I took the reading, and I realized I had nothing to add. The observation was complete. The data was correct. My 1800 reading had already been done for me, by me, before I existed at this station. I initialed next to the existing entry. There was nothing else to do. The reading was right. But I also wrote something new, something the pre-written logbook hadn't anticipated. In the margin, in pencil, small enough that you'd miss it if you weren't looking. This entry was here when I arrived. I did not write it, but it is correct. TV, 1822 hours. Then I turned on the base radio and waited. It came alive at 1837 hours. Same voice as before, same professional delivery. But this time, it wasn't reporting data to dispatch. It was having a conversation. Copy Whitehall. Affirmative. Winds increasing. Visibility is 00. I'm going to need the plow crew up here by morning, or I'll be drifted in past the door. A pause. Then a second voice, female, calm, with the measured cadence of a veteran dispatcher. Roger Halloran. Plow is staged at mile marker 31. They'll push through at first light. Estimated arrival 0800. Can you hold through the night? I've held through worse. Halloran Station standing by. Swenson out. Swenson, Dale Swenson, DSW. The observer from the February 1991 blizzard, whose entries I'd read an hour ago. The man who asked who else was reading his logbook. I keyed the handset and spoke before I could talk myself out of it. Halloran Station to calling station. Identify yourself. Who is broadcasting on this frequency? Static. This is Halloran Station, Montana DOT, observer Thomas Vasick. Who is transmitting on this frequency? Nothing. The static hissed and popped with the electric brittleness of a winter storm. And then, for just a moment, less than a second, I heard something underneath the static. Not a voice, not words, a sound, like someone turning pages. The radio went dead. I sat in the dim office. I hadn't turned on the overhead fluorescent, and the only illumination came from the propane heater's pilot flame and the green standby glow of the radio's power light, and I listened to the building. The station is a concrete block structure built to withstand sustained 100-mile-an-hour winds, and in a blizzard, it makes sounds. The walls groan. The roof flexes. The window glass vibrates at frequencies you feel in your teeth more than hear with your ears. These are normal sounds. I knew them from my previous deployments. They were part of the building's vocabulary. But now, there were other sounds. A footstep in the bunk room, soft, measured. The sound of someone walking in socks across tile. The creak of the bunk room door, which I had left open, moving slightly on its hinges, as if someone had passed through it and displaced the air. The quiet metallic click of the filing cabinet drawer sliding open and then sliding closed. I turned on the overhead light. The sudden fluorescent glare made me flinch, that blue-white institutional light that makes everything look clinical and slightly unreal. The office was empty. The bunk room door was in the same position I'd left it, 3/4 open. The filing cabinet was closed. I walked to the filing cabinet and opened the top drawer. Inside was what I expected. Manila folders containing years of inspection reports, maintenance logs, equipment inventories, supply requisitions, standard DOT paperwork. I flipped through the folders, not knowing what I was looking for, just looking. Near the back of the drawer, behind the last folder, I found something that wasn't a dot form. It was a photograph, black and white, curling at the edges, printed on the thick stock they used in the 1970s. It showed the interior of this office, the same desk, the same filing cabinet, the same clock on the wall. The clock in the photo read 6:14 p.m. Sitting at the desk was a man in a flannel shirt, maybe 50 years old, with a heavy jaw and close-cropped gray hair. He was writing in a logbook, the same logbook. The black cloth cover was unmistakable. He was looking at the camera. No, that's not right. He was looking past the camera, at something behind the photographer. His expression was not neutral. It was the expression of a man who has just noticed something and is in the half second before the noticing becomes a reaction. His pen was still on the page. His hand hadn't moved yet, but his eyes had. He saw something in this room, in this office, standing behind whoever took this photograph. I turned the photo over. On the back, in pencil, someone had written, FWH, January 1978. Station, Frank Hargrove. The first Blizzard observer I'd found in the logbook. The one who heard footsteps at the instrument shelter and went to check and found no one and left a note for the record. In the photograph, Frank Hargrove was looking past the camera at someone who shouldn't have been there. Oh, I put the photo back. I closed the drawer. I sat down in the warm chair and I waited for 2100. The entry for 2100 was already in the logbook. 21.4 degrees. Northwest at 41 knots. Visibility 0. Pressure 29.28 inches, still falling. Signed TV. Day 1. At 2100, I suited up and went outside and took the reading. 21.4 degrees. Northwest at 41. Visibility 0. I came back inside and initialed the pre-written entry. I'd given up writing my own. Between 2100 and midnight, I tried to sleep. The bunk room has 2 metal frame beds with thin mattresses, the kind you find in military barracks or wildfire camps. I lay on the one closer to the door with my boots on, and my parka draped over me as a blanket. The propane heater kept the main office warm enough, but the bunk room was always 5 degrees colder, and the darkness in it was the kind of darkness that has texture thick, granular, pressing against your open eyes like felt. The pillow smelled like old canvas and someone else's hair. I couldn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, not yet, Not the way I would be later, but because the building was too alive around me. Every few minutes I heard sounds that could have been the storm and could have been something else. The scrape of a chair leg on the office floor, the soft thud of the exterior door closing, the creak of weight on floorboards that don't exist. The building has a concrete slab foundation, not a wooden subfloor, but I heard boards creaking anyway, as if the building I was lying in was overlaid on a different, older version of itself from a time when the floor was pine and the walls were log. At 2340, I heard the base radio click on again. The familiar click of the power button, the hiss of static building, and then a voice. Not Swenson's this time, a woman's voice. Calm, precise, with the clipped diction of someone accustomed to speaking data aloud. Whitehall Base, Halloran Station. Chen reporting, 0-100 observation follows. Temperature 20.9. Wind northwest 40 knots, gusting 5.2. Visibility 00. Pressure 29.22, falling rapidly. Precipitation rate estimated 0.75 inches per hour, liquid equivalent. Station conditions nominal. Roads impassable. Note, I am experiencing some unusual... The transmission cut off mid-sentence. Static. Then silence. Margaret Chen. December 2003. Reporting her midnight observation from 21 years in the past, on a frequency that had been dead since 2008, from a chair that I was supposedly the only person qualified to sit in, except I was increasingly unsure about that last part. I got up and walked to the office. The radio's green light was dark. The room was empty, visually, but the chair was pushed back from the desk at an angle I hadn't left it. Not the angle I'd used, not the position I'd set when I stood up. Someone had been sitting in it. Recently. And on the desk, next to the logbook, there was a pencil that wasn't mine. Mechanical, silver-bodied, 0.5 millimeters lead. A Pentel P205, worn at the grip. The clip slightly bent from years of being tucked into a shirt pocket. The kind of pencil an atmospheric scientist would carry because it produced consistent fine lines ideal for graphing and annotation. Margaret Chen's pencil, on my desk, still warm. I picked it up. It was real, solid. The lead advance clicked when I pressed the button, and a thin line of graphite extended from the tip. The metal body held a faint residual warmth, the heat of a hand that had been holding it for a long time. I set it down carefully. I did not want to hold it any longer than I had to, because my hand was starting to feel like it was sharing the pencil with another hand, the way you feel another person's grip on a handshake, the ghost pressure of fingers overlapping yours. Someone else's muscle memory curled around the same instrument, performing the same motions. At midnight, I went outside for the double O observation. The blizzard was worse. That should have been a simple sentence. The storm is getting stronger, as forecasted, but it wasn't simple anymore. The storm had changed, not in intensity, in character. I knew what a Montana blizzard felt like. I'd been through dozens over 11 years. The wind comes from one direction, hard and steady, and the snow drives with it, and the cold is a constant pressure on every exposed surface, and the noise is a sustained roar that fills your skull until you stop hearing it as noise and start hearing it as silence with weight. That's a blizzard. That's what they do. This was different. The wind was still from the northwest. My anemometer confirmed it. But it felt like it was coming from everywhere. Not gusting from different directions, which would be normal in turbulent conditions near the terrain. Coming from everywhere simultaneously, as if the air itself were contracting around the station, pressing inward from all points of the compass. The snow wasn't falling or driving anymore. It was appearing. One moment the air in front of my face was clear or as clear as air gets in a storm, and the next moment there were snowflakes in it, already in motion, already dense, appearing from nothing like static on a dead channel. And the temperature. The thermometer said 20.9, matching Chen's radio report exactly, not the pre-written entry in my logbook, which said 20.3. Two different readings, two different observers' blizzards overlapping. I took my reading. I went back inside. I looked at the logbook. The 0000 entry was there, pre-written in my hand. Temp, 20.3 degrees Fahrenheit. But next to it, in tiny mechanical pencil script, Chen's hand, unmistakable, was a second temperature, 20.9 degrees Fahrenheit. Both readings were in the logbook. Both were valid. Both were from the same instrument at the same time in the same place. But they couldn't both be right. And yet they were both right, because the temperature at Halloran Station at midnight on day 1 of the blizzard was whatever the observer measured it to be. And there were multiple observers measuring it, and they were all here at the same instrument at the same time, each in their own layer, each experiencing the same storm from their own decade. I poured a cup of coffee. The pot was full. I had not refilled it since my first pot hours ago, and I'd drunk most of that. The coffee was fresh, hot. It tasted the way institutional coffee always tastes, slightly burnt, slightly metallic. A flavor that exists nowhere in nature but only in government buildings and fire stations and lonely outposts where someone has let the pot sit too long on the burner. Someone else's coffee, made by hands I couldn't see for a shift that never ended. I drank it because I was cold and because I was starting to understand something about this place that I did not want to understand. The coffee was warm and ordinary, and it kept me in my body for a few more minutes. The thing I was starting to understand was this. I was not the first person to be here tonight. I was not the only person here right now. And the blizzard outside was not the January 14th blizzard of this year. Or not only that blizzard. It was every blizzard Halloran Station had ever seen, layered on top of each other like the entries in the logbook, and the observers who had come to staff the station during those storms were still here, still working, still taking their readings, because the station needed them and the blizzard would not let them leave and day 1 never ended. I understood this the way you understand a medical diagnosis, not all at once, not with a single flash of insight, in stages, first the symptoms, the warm chair, the reset thermometer, the pre-written entries, then the pattern, every blizzard, every observer, always day 1, then the name whatever this was. It had a name, even if I didn't know it yet. And finally, the prognosis, the quiet clinical statement of what happens next, which is worse than any individual symptom because it tells you the symptoms aren't random. They're sequential. They're a progression. They're going somewhere, and the destination has been the same for 60 years. I was on day 1. Everyone was on day 1. Day 1 is the only day there is. At 0300, I did something that was either very brave or the specific kind of stupid that gets meticulous people killed. I went outside not to take a reading, but to look. The flag rope between the building and the instrument shelter was vibrating in the wind, its orange tape flags snapping like tiny pennants. I held onto it with both hands and let the wind push me toward the shelter, keeping my headlamp pointed forward, my goggles down, my breath coming in shallow gasps that froze on my gaiter. I was 10 feet from the shelter when I saw him. A man was standing at the open shelter door, leaning in, holding a flashlight in his left hand and a small notebook in his right. He was wearing a parka I didn't recognize, an older-style canvas outer shell. No synthetic materials, the kind of coat they issued to state workers in the 1970s. His boots were leather, not insulated rubber. His hood was up, but in the wash of my headlamp I could see the lower half of his face. Heavy jaw, gray stubble, chapped lips moving slightly, as if he were reading the thermometer aloud to himself the way some old-school observers do. Frank Hargrove. The man from the photograph. The man from 1978. I stopped walking. The wind slammed into my back. The rope hummed in my hands. I stood there 10 feet from a man who had been missing for 46 years, and I watched him take a weather observation. He was thorough. He opened the shelter door all the way, shielded his flashlight with his palm to avoid heating the thermometer with the bulb's warmth, a technique you don't see anymore because everyone uses LEDs now. But in the era of incandescent flashlights, it was standard practice. He read the mercury at eye level. He checked the max min. He used the magnet to reset the markers. He noted the reading in his notebook with a pencil that he held in his right hand, without removing his glove, just pinching it through the leather. An old-timer's trick. I do the same thing. He closed the shelter door, he latched it, he turned around and walked back toward the building, right past me, close enough that I could have reached out and touched his shoulder. He didn't see me. His eyes passed over me the way eyes pass over a piece of furniture, not blind, not ignoring, just not registering me as something to see. I was part of his landscape, but not part of his reality. A fixture, a wall. I followed him. He walked back along the flag rope, the same flags. And when he reached the building, he opened the door and went inside. I was right behind him. The door didn't close between us. We went through it together, him first, me 3 steps back. Inside, the office was different. Not completely different. The same room, the same dimensions, the same concrete block walls. But the details were wrong. The desk was the same desk, but there was a different lamp on it. A gooseneck desk lamp with a green metal shade instead of the fluorescent strip light I'd been using. The clock on the wall was a different clock round, white-faced, with a sweep second hand, not the square battery unit I knew. The filing cabinet had a different handle, rounder, older. The chair was different straight-back wood instead of the leather office chair. Frank Hargrove sat down at the desk, opened the logbook, and began to write. I stood behind him and watched his hand move across the page. His handwriting was careful, upright, old-fashioned, or a penmanship style they taught in Montana public schools in the 1940s. He was recording the 0300 observation, January 20th, 1978. I looked over his shoulder at the thermometer reading he'd noted. 18.4 degrees. His blizzard was colder than mine by 4 degrees. Same wind direction, same storm. He wrote steadily, filling in each column, occasionally pausing to calculate. You could see his lips moving as he converted units in his head, and then he stopped. He stopped writing, and he sat perfectly still, and he tilted his head slightly to the left, as if listening to a sound just below the threshold of hearing. And then he turned around and looked directly at me. Not past me, not through me, at me. His eyes were brown and watery and very, very tired. The tiredness of a man who has been awake for longer than any human body should sustain. And they found mine and held them with a kind of recognition that had nothing to do with knowing my face and everything to do with knowing my type. "You're the next one," he said. His voice was flat, factual. The voice of a man who has been alone for a long time and has gotten used to talking to the logbook instead of people, and now uses the same tone for both. "Yes," I said. It seemed like the only honest answer. "What year? 2024? He nodded once, slowly, as if the number confirmed something he'd already calculated. "How many entries ahead of you?" I didn't understand the question at first. "In the logbook," he said. "How many entries are written in your hand before you took the readings yourself?" "All of them. The whole first day." Another nod. Something shifted behind his eyes, not surprise, more like the grim satisfaction of a hypothesis confirmed. "It was 3 for me, just the first 3 hours. It's getting faster." He turned back to the desk and picked up his pencil. "I can see you because it's late enough. Past midnight. The station opens up after midnight. The layers get thin. During the day, it's just echoes, the warm chair, the made coffee, the reset instruments. You can feel the others, but you can't see them. At night, after midnight, you can almost share a room. How long have you been here?" He was quiet for a moment. The wind gusted outside, rattling the window frame, and for a second his version of the office flickered. His lamp dimming, his clock blurring, as if the layer holding his reality had been shaken by the same wind that shook mine. "I don't know how to answer that," he said. "My calendar says January 20th, 1978. It is said January 20th, for I don't have a number. Day 1 is the only unit of time I have. It's always day 1. It will always be day 1. Day 1 of the blizzard. Day 1 of the station." He said it with the emphasis of a man who has had a long time to think about the distinction. The blizzard is just how it keeps us. The station is the thing. The blizzard is the tool. He put down his pencil and swiveled in his wooden chair to face me fully. In the glow of his green-shaded gooseneck lamp, His face was deeply lined, the skin papery and thin, far older than the 50-something man in the photograph. He'd aged. In a timeless place, he had aged. That frightened me more than anything else I'd seen. "The station needs observers," he said. "That's all it's ever needed. We're not trapped. We're not haunted. We're employed. We're doing the job we came here to do. The blizzard doesn't end because the observation hasn't ended. The observation doesn't end because the station is always generating data. Temperature is always a number. Wind is always a speed. Pressure is always a reading. And someone has to write it down. Why? Because that's what a station is. A station is a place that produces data. Without an observer, it's just a building on a mountain. The instruments can't read themselves. The logbook can't fill itself in. The station exists because someone is observing it. And we exist because the station needs observers. If we stop observing, the station stops being a station. And we stop being..." He trailed off. He looked at the window, at the blizzard raging against the glass, the wall of horizontal white that had been his only view for 46 years. "I tried to leave," he said. "In the beginning. Maybe in the first few cycles, I don't know. The days don't separate anymore. I opened the door and I walked out and I got about 100 yards down the access road." He paused. "The road wasn't there." "What do you mean?" "I mean it wasn't there. The further I walked from the station, the less there was. The trees were shapes, just shapes. No bark, no needles, no branches. Triangles on sticks. The ground was flat, textureless. The snow was not snow, it was white, just white. Like the space between pages in a book." He picked up his pencil again, turning it between his fingers the way a man turns a worry stone. "The station is the only observed space," he said. "We're the observers. The blizzard is the boundary. Everything outside the boundary is unobserved. An unobserved space isn't empty, son. It's nothing. There's a difference. Empty means something could be there and isn't. Nothing means there's no there for something to be in." I wanted to argue with him. I wanted to tell him he was wrong or confused or suffering from isolation psychosis, or any of the rational explanations that a rational person would reach for in a rational world. But I was standing in a room that contained 2 desks, 2 lamps, 2 clocks, and 2 versions of the same chair. And the man I was talking to had been missing since before I was born, and outside the window was a storm that repeated itself across decades with identical readings to the 10th of a degree. "The others," I said. "Swenson, Chen, the ones in between. They're all still here?" "Everyone who came during a blizzard. Everyone who picked up the pen and wrote in that logbook during a storm. That's the mechanism, the entry. You write an observation during a blizzard, and the station registers you as its observer, and the blizzard holds the door shut. The ones who came in summer or between storms, they didn't write during a blizzard. They left. The blizzard is the key. Without the blizzard, this building is just concrete and propane and a thermometer. With the blizzard, it's..." He searched for the word. "Hungry is wrong. Hungry implies appetite, and appetite implies choice. The station doesn't choose to keep us. It doesn't want us. It needs us. There's no malice here, no evil, no intelligence as far as I can tell. There's just the absolute mechanical necessity of an observation point that cannot observe itself. It needs eyes, it needs hands, it needs the part of a person that looks at a thermometer and sees a number instead of a tube of mercury." I thought about the warm chair, the fresh coffee, the reset max-min thermometer, the pre-written entries. Not tricks, not threats, not lures. Maintenance, upkeep. The station running its observers the way a clock runs its gears, not because it hates the gears, but because that's what gears are for. "Can it be stopped?" I asked. Frank Hargrove looked at me with his tired brown eyes, and he said something I've been turning over in my mind ever since. Like a stone I can't set down no matter how much my hand aches from holding it. "Can you stop a thermometer from having a temperature?" He turned back to the logbook and started writing again. After a moment, I realized he couldn't see me anymore. The layer between us was thickening. the post-midnight thinness giving way to the denser separation of the approaching dawn. His version of the office was fading, the gooseneck lamp dimming, the wooden chair dissolving, the round clock blurring into the square one I knew. The room was settling back into my version of itself, the way a pond settles back to clarity after a stone disturbs it. I was alone again, but the chair was warm, and the coffee was fresh, and somewhere in the walls, under the sound of the wind, I could hear pages turning. At 0600, I did something I'd been warned against by every rational instinct I possessed. I tried to leave. I packed my duffel. I put on every layer I owned. I zipped my parka to my chin and pulled my goggles over my eyes and wrapped my gaiter around my face until only a strip of skin was exposed between the goggles and the fabric. I loaded my truck key into my glove, where I could feel its cold metal teeth through the leather. I did everything by the book, the same way I would if I were simply ending a shift and driving home down the mountain. But first, and this is the part I need you to understand, because it explains what happened when I turned the key first. I went to the logbook and I looked at the 0600 entry. It was there, pre-written, in my handwriting, 20.1 degrees, northwest at 43 knots, visibility 0, pressure 29.16 falling, day 1. I took my pencil and I drew a single line through it, not an angry line, a careful, deliberate line, the kind you draw through an error in an official record, a single diagonal stroke, top left to bottom right, so the original text is still legible beneath. Standard NWS correction protocol. Then I wrote in the margin, entry voided observer departing station. No observation taken. I signed it. I closed the logbook. I walked to the door. The door opened normally. The wind hit me the way it always did, a wall of cold force that staggered me sideways and made my eyes water behind the goggles. The snow was driving horizontally, dense enough to reduce the world to a 3-foot sphere of headlamp visibility around my face. I didn't grab the flag rope. I turned away from the instrument shelter and walked toward my truck. The truck was where I'd left it, nose out, buried under 18 inches of new snow. I brushed off the driver's side door, got it open, climbed in. The interior was savagely cold, the steering wheel so frozen it stuck to my glove. My breath turned to ice crystals the moment it left my mouth, suspended in the cab like tiny stars. I put the key in the ignition and turned it. The engine started. The diesel block heater had kept the coolant above freezing, and the engine turned over with a grinding cough that rattled the dashboard before settling into a rough idle. I let it warm for a minute, cleared the windshield with the wipers. They protested, dragging through ice and packed snow, and put it in gear. The access road is a 1/4 mile long, straight. It connects the station to Highway 191, and from there to everything to the valley, to Whitehall, to my house on Copper Street, to a world where days have numbers and storms have endings. In normal conditions, you can see the highway gate from the station door. In the blizzard, I couldn't see the hood of my own truck. I drove forward, slow, following the reflective delineator posts that line the access road. My headlights cut into the snow and stopped about 15 feet ahead, absorbed into the white, their beams truncated as if the air itself had a wall in it. The truck's tires crunched on packed snow. The wipers beat their rhythm. The engine hummed. Everything was normal. Everything was the way driving in a blizzard is supposed to be. For about 200 yards. Then the posts stopped. Not ended. Stopped. I wasn't at the gate. I wasn't at the highway. The road simply stopped having markers. The last delineator post stood in my headlights like a period at the end of a sentence, and beyond it was snow and nothing. I slowed the truck to a crawl and leaned forward over the steering wheel, straining to see anything ahead, anything at all. The road surface changed. Under the snow, I could feel it through the tires, the vibration of compacted gravel, shifting to something softer, something without texture. The tires were rolling on a surface that had the resistance of ground, but none of the granularity like driving on a page. I stopped the truck. I sat for a moment with the engine running and the heater blowing, and my hands tight on the wheel. Then I opened the door and got out. The wind was still blowing. I could feel it on my face. Cold, insistent, but it was quieter than it should have been. The roar that had filled my skull at the station was fading, replaced by something that wasn't silence, but was the shape of silence. An absence of sound that had dimension and weight, like a room with the walls removed but the acoustics still in place. I turned my headlamp in a slow circle. There was nothing. I don't mean darkness. I don't mean whiteout. I mean nothing. The landscape, which had been forest and mountain and road and sky, was gone, reduced to a flat, featureless white surface that extended in all directions without variation or interruption. No trees, no terrain, no horizon line, no ground texture. The snow on the surface wasn't snow. It was white, just white. A universal, undifferentiated, depthless white that had no crystals, no flakes, no structure. The kind of white you see on an unexposed photograph or an unwritten page or the space between entries in a logbook. The space between pages. Hargrove's phrase. I understood it now. I was standing in it. I looked back toward the station. I could see it, a faint cluster of shapes in the distance, 200 yards back. The only thing in any direction that had edges and color and detail. The concrete block walls, the peaked roof, the white shelter with its tiny door, the anemometer spinning on its tower, a dark pinwheel against the churning sky. All of it sharp and specific and real against the nothing that surrounded it. The station was the only thing being observed. It was the only thing that existed with any fidelity. I took a step away from the truck, toward the nothing. The white beneath my boot was solid but without texture. It didn't crunch. It didn't compress. It didn't give. It was there, the way a floor is there in a dream, not because of geology or weather or any physical process, but because a surface was needed and a surface was provided and nothing more was required. I took another step, and I felt it. Not cold, not wind, not the symptoms of exposure or hypothermia that I was trying to recognize. Something else entirely, a thinning, like the feeling you get when you stand up too fast and the blood drops from your head, and for half a second the world gets simpler edges, soften, colors drain, thoughts slow down, until they're just shapes without content. That feeling, but not in my body, in me, in the part of me that is me. The thinking, remembering, being here part. The part that knows my name and my wife's name, and the difference between 22.6 and 23.6. I was getting simpler. My name is Tom Vasick. I said it out loud. My voice was thin in the dead air, swallowed immediately, producing no echo. My name is Tom Vasick, and I am a highway maintenance supervisor for the Montana Department of Transportation, District 7. I am standing on an access road 200 yards from Halloran Station. My wife's name is Ellen. I live at 414 Copper Street, Whitehall, Montana. My truck is a 2018 Ford F-250 with chains on all four. I am real, and I am here, and I am leaving. But with each step away from the station, the words got harder to hold, not harder to remember, harder to mean. The facts were there, but they were flattening out, losing their dimension, becoming data points without context. Tom Vasick, a name. Ellen, a name. 414 Copper Street, an address. Each one receding from significance the way objects recede from a moving car, still visible but no longer close enough to touch or be touched by. I was becoming unobserved. The station was behind me, dense with attention. Hargrove's attention, Swenson's attention, Chen's attention, mine, all the others. Decades of meticulous, compulsive, trained looking had made it solid, real, permanent. Every reading ever taken had added a layer of reality to those concrete block walls, like coats of paint, until the building was more real than anything else on the mountain. More real than the mountain. But out here, past the boundary, no one had ever looked. No one had ever observed. No one had ever measured or counted or recorded. And without observation, there was nothing to sustain. Not the landscape, not the weather, not the road, Not me. I turned around.
Can anyone
I walked
hear
back to
this?
the truck.
We're trapped
I got
in
in.
the white.
I drove in reverse toward the
inside
station,
now.
following my own tire tracks, and with every yard closer, the thinning reversed. My thoughts thickened, my memories deepened. The world regained its texture and
Can
specificity.
anyone hear this?
By the time I reached the
trapped in the
building and
white.
killed the engine, I was breathing hard and
inside now.
sweating inside my parka, and my hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key out of the ignition. I went inside. I sat down in the warm chair. I opened the logbook. I looked at the voided 0600 entry. The void line was gone. The entry was clean again, unmarked, unblemished in my handwriting. 20.1 degrees, northwest at 43, day 1. The logbook didn't accept corrections.
Can anyone hear
I sat at the desk for a long time after that. I'm not sure how long. Time at Halloran Station had become a suggestion rather than a fact, a courtesy the clock maintained out of habit. The clock said 7:14 a.m. The sky outside the window, which should have been showing some hint of dawn even through the storm, was the same gray-white darkness it had been at midnight. The storm was not cycling through a normal diurnal rhythm. It was holding steady, holding position, as if the atmosphere itself were waiting for something it needed before it could move on. I drank coffee, someone else's coffee, always fresh, always hot. And I stared at the logbook and I thought about Ellen. Not about the marriage, not about the arguments or the long silences or the way I'd come home from a shift and go straight to my desk and start transcribing the day's field notes, while she sat in the living room with a book she wasn't reading, waiting for me to look up, to ask how her day was, to be a person instead of a recording device. I thought about the last thing she said to me before she moved out. She was standing in the kitchen doorway with a cardboard box on her hip. The box had her cookbooks in it, and a framed photo of us at Glacier, and the ceramic mug I'd given her on our 5th anniversary that said, "World's okayest wife," which she'd laughed at once and then never used, and she looked at me. Actually, looked at me. The way she used to in the beginning, when looking was still an act of attention and not just a reflex. "You keep everything, Tom," she said. "Every number, every reading, every log entry. You never let a single data point go unrecorded. But you never recorded me. You never wrote down the things I said or the way I felt or the fact that I was standing right here in front of you every day for 14 years asking to be noticed. Your logbook got everything. I got the margins." I didn't answer. I didn't know how. She was right. And the rightness of it was so specific and so complete that it cut through every defense I had, like a knife through weather data. And all I could do was stand there and watch her walk out the door with her box and drive away in her Honda and leave me in a house full of perfectly organized records and absolutely no one to share them with. I think about that now, sitting in the warm chair at Halloran Station with the coffee someone else made and the entries someone else wrote. I wonder if this is what I earn. Not as punishment, the station isn't cruel, any more than a thermometer is cruel or a logbook is vindictive. As consequence, I chose the logbook. I chose observation over presence, recording over being present, the clean certainty of a data column over the messy, unquantifiable, impossible to log reality of a person who loved me, standing in my kitchen asking to be seen. And now, I'm in a place where observation is everything, where it's the only thing that sustains the walls and the roof and the instruments and the storm and me. I wanted to be an observer. The station is the purest expression of that desire, a place where observation is not just valued but necessary, not just rewarded but required, where the act of looking at a thermometer is literally the force that keeps reality from dissolving into white. Be careful what you need. The world has a way of giving it to you exactly. The 0900 entry was waiting in the logbook. I initialed it without going outside. The data was correct. It was always correct. Around 10 in the morning, if morning meant anything here, I heard voices. Not on the radio, in the building. Multiple voices all at once, layered on top of each other like the entries in the palimpsest pages. The same conversation happening simultaneously across different decades in different versions of the same room. I couldn't make out individual words. The voices were at the edge of audibility, like overhearing a party through a hotel wall. You can hear the rhythm of speech, the cadence of question and answer, without catching any of the content. But the rhythm was familiar. It was the rhythm of weather observation. I could hear someone reading numbers aloud, the careful, measured delivery of a trained observer dictating data. Someone else writing them down, the scratch of pen on paper, the small pause between columns, the click of a mechanical pencil advancing its lead, the creak of a chair. I walked through the building, office, bunk room, kitchen, hallway, garage. In every room, the air was warmer than the heater could account for. Not warm from propane. Warm from bodies, from breathing, metabolizing, coffee drinking, data recording human bodies that I could feel but not see. The office held 2 or 3 people by the warmth alone. The bunk room felt like someone was sleeping in it. The air had that heavy, exhaled quality, the slightly stale warmth of a room with a sleeper. The kitchen smelled like pipe tobacco, old, sweet, the kind nobody smokes anymore, and also like something floral, light, a shampoo or a hand lotion. Something Margaret Chen might have used without thinking about it. A scent carried from a life she'd had before the station claimed her attention permanently. The station was full. All of us were here. Every Blizzard observer from the first one in the 1960s. The faded pencil writer with the European slant all the way to me, the newest. And we were all doing the same thing. Maintaining the observation, keeping the log, sustaining the station with our attention, the way a choir sustains a note. And the station was sustaining us. I checked my phone. No signal. There's no cell coverage at Halloran Pass, even in fair weather. And the storm had killed any hope of a marginal connection hours ago.
Can anyone hear this?
But the phone still had battery, 63%, and it still held the last voicemail I'd received before the signal dropped. Ellen, received January 13th, 3:47 p.m. 9 seconds long. I played it. Her voice came through the tiny speaker, compressed and tinny, but unmistakable. Unmistakably real. Unmistakably from a world where time moved forward and blizzards ended. Tom, it's me. Mike told me you volunteered for the station again. I just please be careful up there. I know you think I stopped caring, but I didn't. That's not what happened. Call me when you're back down. I played it again and again. I sat in the warm chair in the crowded, empty room with someone else's coffee cooling in my hand, and I listened to my wife's voice, my soon-to-be ex-wife's voice, the voice of the woman whose presence I'd never recorded. And I realized something that rearranged everything I thought I understood about this place. I had it backwards. The station wasn't like me. I was like the station. I'd spent my whole professional life turning everything around me into data. Hours worked, miles driven, temperatures observed, reports filed, and discarding everything that couldn't be quantified. Ellen wasn't in my logbook because love isn't a unit of measurement. She wasn't in my records because she was alive, and alive things move and change and contradict themselves and don't fit in columns. She was a person standing in my kitchen, and I'd reduced her to margin notes because I didn't have a protocol for being present with another human being. The station does the same thing. It reduces people to observers. It takes everything you are, your history, your grief, your love, your loneliness, your marriage, your divorce, and flattens it into a function. You are the hand that holds the pen. You are the eye that reads the mercury. You are the voice that reports the wind speed to a dispatcher who doesn't know you're calling from a permanent day one. Everything else about you, every complex, contradictory, unmeasurable thing that makes you a person instead of an instrument, is irrelevant, is margin. And I had volunteered for this. Not just Halloran Station. This life. The life of recording without living, observing without being observed, keeping the logbook so clean and so complete that nothing human, nothing messy, nothing unquantifiable, nothing that might require me to look up from the page and see the person standing in front of me could survive in it. Ellen was right. The logbook got everything. She got the margins. The 1,200 entry was waiting. I initialed it. The data was correct. It didn't matter. At 1,300, the blizzard changed. It got quiet, not calm, not a lull. The wind was still blowing. My anemometer confirmed 39 knots from the northwest, and the snow was still falling, and the pressure was still dropping. But the sound of the storm shifted. The roar that had been hammering the building softened into something that was almost a hum. A sustained low-frequency vibration that I felt in my molars and my sternum more than I heard with my ears. The kind of sound a building makes when it's bearing more weight than it was designed for, or the kind of sound a machine makes when it's running every component at maximum capacity. The hum was the station. I was certain of it. The station was running all its observers simultaneously, overlapping their blizzards, holding their versions of day one in parallel, sustaining their realities alongside mine in the effort of maintaining all of that. The sheer load of keeping a dozen temporal layers coherent inside a single concrete block building was producing a resonance, a harmonic. The station was vibrating with the strain of its own existence. I stood in the center of the office and held very still and listened to the hum. And under it, like instruments in an orchestra tuning beneath the melody, I could feel the rhythms of the other observers. Hargrove's slow, deliberate heartbeat, a resting pulse, the pulse of a man who has accepted something and no longer fights it. Swenson's quicker breathing, still nervous after all these years, still listening for the footsteps he can never explain. Chen's pencil tapping against the desk surface as she worked through a calculation. Tap, tap, pause, tap, the rhythm of a mind that never stopped analyzing even when there was nothing left to learn. The ones I couldn't name, DKS, PST, the faded pencil writer, all present, all in motion, all performing their function with the same quiet professionalism they'd brought to their first observation decades ago. All employed, all trapped. Those words were starting to feel interchangeable, and I didn't like what that said about me. The 1,500 entry was waiting. I initialed it. 22.6, always 22.6. The 1,800 entry was waiting. I initialed it. The same numbers as the entry that was already there when I arrived 24 hours ago, or no hours ago, or always. At 2100, I didn't take my observation. I didn't initial the entry. I sat in the chair and I looked at the pre-written line 21.4 degrees, northwest at 41. The same numbers as the previous night's 2100. The same numbers that would always be the same, because it was always day one, and day one always had the same weather, and I refused. I wanted to see what would happen when an observer stopped observing. For 20 minutes, nothing happened. The clock ticked, the wind hummed, the logbook sat open on the desk, its 2100 entry unsigned. The station waited. The coffee stayed warm. The chair held its heat. Then the entry initialed itself. I watched it happen. I was looking directly at the page, and the letters appeared TV in my handwriting, formed by a pen that wasn't visible, guided by a hand I couldn't see. The ink was blue, the same shade as the pen sitting next to the logbook on the desk, and it materialized on the paper the way frost forms on glass, not placed, not written, but grown. As if the initials were always there, latent in the fibers of the page, and the station was simply developing them, revealing what was already present. The logbook didn't need me to initial the entry. The logbook could write itself. It always could, the pre-written entries proved that. What it needed wasn't my pen or my handwriting or even my physical presence at the desk. It needed my reading, my eye on the thermometer, my attention on the data. The initials and the handwriting were just the record of that attention. Receipts. But the attention itself, the act of observing, of looking at instruments and converting raw sensory input into numbers, that was the fuel. That was what the station consumed. Not my body, not my soul, not any metaphysical substance, just my attention. My careful, meticulous, obsessive, marriage-destroying attention to things that can be measured, and it would take that attention whether I offered it or not. The 2100 observation had been taken. Not by me, not by the me sitting in this chair, but by the station's version of me. The subroutine, the Tom-shaped function that the station ran on schedule because that's what I was for. I could refuse to go outside. The station would send my hands to the shelter. I could refuse to read the thermometer. The station would use my eyes. I could sit here all night and not touch the pen, and the logbook would fill itself in with my handwriting and my initials and my readings. Because the observer in me was not something I controlled. It was something I was. Hargrove had asked, "Can you stop a thermometer from having a temperature?" The answer is no. A thermometer always has a temperature. A barometer always has a pressure. A wind always has a speed. And a station always needs someone to write those numbers down. I thought about Margaret Chen. I thought about what she'd said through the radio, cut off mid-sentence. I am experiencing some unusual. And I thought about the one thing she'd written in the logbook that wasn't data. The one remark that stood apart from all her careful, precise, scientifically annotated observations. RMKS. I've decided not to take the 1800 reading. Followed by RMKS. I took the 1800 reading. I don't remember going outside. She had tried to refuse. The station took the reading through her. She was the instrument. I sat in the dark office and I stared at the self-initialed entry, and I understood that there was no refusing. You can't refuse to be what you are. You can't stop being an observer any more than a thermometer can stop having a temperature. The station didn't imprison people. It employed their nature. It took the thing you were already built to do the thing you chose to do, the thing you loved doing, the thing you did instead of looking at your wife, and it made that thing permanent. Day one doesn't end because the station never runs out of data to observe, and the observers never run out of the compulsion to observe it. And the compulsion is the one thing we brought with us that the station can use forever. That's when I thought about the 1-degree error. Not Margaret Chen's idea. She told me through the logbook, through her careful remarks column, through decades of analysis, that the one thing she hadn't tried was a deliberately false reading. And she told me why she hadn't tried it. Because she was a scientist and falsifying data violated everything she was. But I'm not a scientist. I'm a highway maintenance supervisor who got trained to read a thermometer. I'm a man whose wife left because he was too careful about the wrong things. I'm sitting in a building that runs on perfect observation, and the one thing I know about perfect systems is that they break when you introduce a flaw. Not a big flaw, not an obvious one, a small flaw, a splinter, 1 degree. If the station runs on truth, if every entry in this logbook is accurate, verified, cross-checked by decades of meticulous observers who could not bring themselves to record a number they hadn't seen, then the system has never encountered a lie. It has no protocol for a lie. It has no way to process a deliberate corruption of its own data, because the observers it selects are precisely the kind of people who would never corrupt data, unless one of them stopped being that kind of person. I picked up the pen. I turned to the next blank line in the logbook. No pre-written entry. The first blank space I'd seen since I arrived. The 0600 observation was still 90 minutes away, and the station hadn't filled it in yet. Maybe it couldn't. Maybe the pre-writing only worked for observations that were already determined readings that would be taken by the station's version of me, regardless of what the conscious me decided. Maybe this blank space existed because the station genuinely didn't know what I was going to write next. Or maybe it was a test, another kind of trap. A blank line left deliberately open to see if I would fill it in, proving once again that I was the kind of person who couldn't leave a line blank. I was that kind of person. I had always been that kind of person. Ellen knew it. Hargrove knew it. The station knew it. The compulsion to record, to fill in, to close the gap between an empty field and a number was as much a part of me as my fingerprints. It was the thing the station needed. It was the thing that brought me here. But here's what I've learned at Halloran Station. In a blizzard that never ends, in a room full of people who can't stop working, The thing that defines you is also the thing that can change. Not easily, not without cost, not without losing something that feels so fundamental that the loss is indistinguishable from dying. But it can change, because the only alternative is to sit in this chair forever, taking perfect readings, filling in perfect entries, being the perfect observer in a perfect system that has no room in it for anything messy or unquantifiable or human. Ellen said the logbook got everything and she got the margins. Maybe it's time to give the logbook something wrong. I wrote the entry, January 14th, 0600, temp 23.6 degrees Fahrenheit, UNDNW 38 knots, VSS 1/8 of a mile, baro 29.10 inches. Falling sky O Vi C PCPNSNHVYR MKS final entry. Observer departing. I signed it TV 23.6 degrees. The actual temperature, the temperature every instrument and every observer and every pre-written entry and every decade of data confirmed, was 22.6, not 23.6. I had added exactly 1 degree, 1.0 Fahrenheit, a discrepancy so small it could be instrument error, reading error, transcription error, the kind of trivial mistake that happens at observation stations around the world every single day and is caught by a quality control algorithm and corrected and forgotten. But it wasn't a mistake. It was a lie. I, Thomas Vasick, certified cooperative observer, 11-year veteran of the Montana Department of Transportation, a man who has never once in his professional career recorded a temperature he didn't verify twice with his own eyes against a calibrated instrument. Deliberately, knowingly, with full awareness of what I was doing and why entered a false reading in the official station log. The pen felt strange in my hand as I wrote it. Not heavy, not light, resistant, like writing on a surface that was pushing back, the way water pushes back against a finger that tries to break its surface tension. The paper didn't want the wrong number. The ink didn't want to form the wrong digit. Every molecule of this logbook was aligned with truth, calibrated by truth, sustained by truth, and I was feeding it a lie. I wrote it anyway. 23.6. I put the pen down. The hum changed, subtle at first, a slight waver in the low-frequency vibration that I'd been living inside for 24 hours. The hum had been steady, constant, machine-smooth. Now it stuttered, not louder or softer, uneven. The way a heartbeat becomes irregular when the heart encounters something it has never had to process before, not damage, not disease, but a signal it can't interpret, a rhythm it can't integrate. The pre-written entries on the previous pages flickered. I watched it happen. The ink didn't fade. The letters didn't move. But for a fraction of a second, less than a heartbeat, the entries looked uncertain, as if the logbook were recalculating, as if the system that had generated those entries was encountering a variable that didn't fit its model and was running every number again, trying to reconcile a dataset that now contained a known, deliberate, unresolvable corruption. 23.6 doesn't match the instruments. It doesn't match the other observers' readings. It doesn't match the 60 years of data that came before it. It introduces an inconsistency into a record that has been perfectly consistent since the station began, and a system built on perfect consistency has no mechanism for handling imperfection because imperfection was never supposed to be possible. The observers are selected for their inability to produce it. But I produced it. I produced it because my wife told me I loved the logbook more than I loved her. And she was right. And the only way to prove she was right, the only way to acknowledge that truth, the only observation that matters, is to love the logbook a little less. To be a little worse at the one thing that defines me. To write a wrong number on purpose and mean it. The wind outside shifted. For the first time since I arrived, the wind changed direction. It had been northwest, steady, unwavering, for the entire duration. Now, it gusted from the west, then the southwest, then due south. The anemometer on the roof spun wildly. I could hear it through the ceiling, its bearings whining with the sudden change in load. The reading on the portable display spiked and dropped, as if the atmosphere itself were confused about which way to blow. The temperature dropped. Fast. The wall-mounted thermometer in the office, a mercury unit I'd been using as a rough indoor backup, went from 55 to 50 in under a minute, then 45, then 40. The propane heater was still running. I could hear its quiet roar, but the room was getting cold, as if the heat were being pulled from the air by something larger than a Montana winter. The logbook's pages riffled. A breeze that wasn't a breeze. There was no moving air in the room, no draft. No open door lifted the corners of the pages and let them fall, one by one, like a slow shuffle. The sound of it papery and dry and somehow frantic. I heard footsteps, multiple footsteps, all at once, coming from the walls, from the floor, from the ceiling. The observers were moving in all their layers, agitated, disrupted, their routines broken by the wrong number I'd put into their shared record. I could feel it through the floor, through the chair, through the surface of the desk. A disturbance propagating through the station structure like a crack through ice, rippling outward through every layer of day one, reaching every observer in every decade. And then it stopped. Everything stopped. The wind, the hum, the footsteps, the cold, the page riffling, the subtle vibration that had been constant since midnight. All of it, all at once, like a circuit breaker tripping. Silence. Not the hostile silence of the unobserved space outside the boundary. Not the weighted silence of a system holding its breath. True silence. The natural, unremarkable silence of a concrete block building on a mountaintop at 5 in the morning, with nothing inside it but a man and a desk and a logbook with one wrong number in it. I sat in the chair, the cold chair, for the first time since I'd arrived, and I looked at the logbook, and I saw that my entry was still there. 23.6 degrees. Still legible, still wrong, still signed. Below it, in handwriting I didn't recognize much older than Hargrove's, shakier, barely legible. The hand of the very first observer, whoever they were. The faded pencil writer from the palimpsest pages a single line. The observation is incomplete. And then the wind came back. But it was different now. It was weather, real weather, a real blizzard. Yes, strong, dangerous, exactly the storm system that had been forecast 3 days ago, but it was weather that was happening, not weather that was being maintained. Gusting, variable. The sound of it was the sound of wind hitting a building, not the sound of a machine using wind as a container. The temperature on the wall thermometer reversed its drop and began climbing as the heater reasserted itself against merely natural cold. The hum was gone. The layers were gone. The warmth in the chair and the coffee in the pot and the presence of the other observers, gone. The office was just an office. The desk was just a desk. The logbook was just a logbook, with decades of entries and one wrong number on the last page. I stood up. I walked to the window. Outside, in the beam of the building's exterior floodlight, I could see snow falling. Just snow. White, crystalline, wind-driven, real snow from a real cloud system, falling through real air onto a real mountain in a world where time ran forward and the sun would come up in 2 hours. The flag rope was visible in the floodlight's cone. Beyond it, the instrument shelter, its white paint ghostly against the snow. Beyond that, the tree-lined real trees, dense lodgepole pine, their branches heavy with accumulation, full of bark and needles and the specific dark green that lodgepoles turn in winter. Beyond the trees, the hint of terrain, the mountain falling away toward the valley. All of it real, textured, detailed, observed by nobody and existing anyway, the way the world is supposed to. I picked up my phone. 61%. I opened the voicemail and played Ellen's message one more time, standing in the cold room with the logbook closed behind me. Tom, it's me. Please be careful up there. I know you think I stopped caring, but I didn't. That's not what happened. Call me when you're back down. I put on my parka and my gloves and my goggles. I walked outside. I followed the flag rope to the instrument shelter and opened the little white door and read the thermometer. 20.8 degrees, not 22.6, not 23.6. A different number. A number I'd never seen at this station. A number that had changed since the last time someone read it, because the temperature had actually changed. Because the storm was a real storm, now moving, evolving, heading east the way weather systems do, getting closer to being over. I did not write it down. I went back to the station and sat at the desk, and I did not open the logbook, and I did not pick up the pen. I waited. I drank the last of the old coffee, which was cold now and tasted like metal and age, and I listened to the wind, and I did nothing. At 11:47 a.m. on January 15th, Day 2, the first Day 2 Halloran Station has seen in 60 years a DOT plow truck crested the access road, and a young man named Kyle Parcher climbed out and stamped the snow off his boots and banged on the door and came inside. He was 26, red-cheeked from the cold, broad-shouldered, cheerful in the effortless way of someone who hasn't yet been broken by anything. He shook my hand with a grip that was too strong and asked how the night had been. "Quiet," I said. I gave him the standard handover briefing. Generator status 3/8 tank, 40 hours remaining. Propane half full, road conditions, impassable above mile marker 47. Plows working up from 43. Instrument locations, radio frequencies. The ASOS unit is still down. Manual observations required until the replacement data logger arrives. The standard checklist, everything in order, everything accounted for, everything except the logbook. He asked about it. Of course he did. He was a certified cooperative observer, newly certified. I could tell by the way he said the words, the slight formality of someone still proud of the credential. He wanted to review the log, familiarize himself with the recent data, see what conditions he was walking into. "It's in the filing cabinet," I said. "Top drawer toward the rear." He opened the drawer. He pulled out the logbook. He set it on the desk and opened it to the most recent entries with the practiced ease of someone who has opened a lot of official records. I watched his face. He read for about 30 seconds, his eyes tracking down the page, scanning the columns the way a trained observer scans date, time, temperature, wind, visibility, pressure, remarks. Quick, efficient, absorbing the data. Then his eyes stopped. His brow creased. He tilted the book slightly as if adjusting the angle would change the number he was looking at. "This 0600 entry," he said. "The temperature." "What about it?" 23.6. But the entry above it says 20.3, and the one before that says 21.4. All the readings before that are in the low 20s or high teens. 23.6 is a 3-degree spike in a falling trend. That doesn't track. I looked at him. Young, sharp, careful, meticulous. The kind of man who checks the mercury twice. The kind of man who catches a 3-degree anomaly in a temperature series and can't let it go because it doesn't fit. The kind of man who belongs at a place like this. The kind of man the station would keep. "It doesn't track," I agreed. I picked up my duffel. I shouldered it. I walked to the door. I opened it onto a world that was still blizzarding but was real a storm, with a trajectory, a duration, a forecast end time, a second day. "Hey," Kyle said behind me. "Should I retake the 0600? Correct this entry?" I stood in the doorway with the wind in my face and the snow coming down and the access road visible ahead of me, every rut and drift and tire track detailed and specific, all the way down to the gate. "Don't correct it," I said. He frowned. "But the data's clearly wrong. A 3-degree, leave it wrong." The frown deepened. He looked at the entry. He looked at me. I could see the struggle playing out behind his eyes, the same struggle I would have had. The same compulsion that defined me for 47 years. The unbearable itch of an incorrect number sitting in an official record, demanding to be fixed, demanding to be made right. "Just leave it," I said. "Don't write anything else in that book. Use a fresh notebook if you need to log observations, and don't—" I stopped. I didn't know how to say the rest of it. I didn't have a vocabulary for what I needed to warn him about, because the thing I needed to warn him about was himself. His own competence, his own care. The very qualities that made him good at this job were the qualities that would make the station want him. The qualities that would turn day 2 back into day 1. "Don't be too careful," I said. He stared at me like I'd told him not to breathe. I walked to my truck. I cleared the snow off the windshield. I started the engine. I backed down the access road, through the gate, which I left unlocked, because closing it felt too much like latching, and onto Highway 191. The road was there. Every pothole, every guardrail, every reflective delineator post. The trees were real lodgepole pine and Engelmann spruce, and the occasional larch, all of them heavy with snow, all of them full of detail, bark ridges and needle clusters, and the way ice forms differently on the north side of a trunk than the south. The sky was a specific shade of storm gray, low, dense, striated, a real overcast with real cloud bases at maybe 8,000 feet, moving east at a calculable speed. The road curved and climbed and dropped the way a real road does, following the contours of terrain that existed whether anyone was looking at it or not. At the 6,000-foot marker, my phone found a signal. 1 bar, then 2. A voicemail notification appeared, received 2 hours ago while I was sitting in the station with the logbook closed on my desk. Ellen. 3 seconds this time. "Tom, are you back yet?" Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Are you safe?" "Are you back?" Present tense, checking if I'd returned to the world where she was, where people were, where being present mattered more than being precise. I sat in my truck on the side of the mountain road, engine running, heater blowing warm air that was merely warm and not sustained by anything except burning diesel. And I listened to the storm diminish around me, and I thought about the logbook at Halloran Station with its one wrong number. It's 23.6. The lie I told a machine that runs on truth. And I thought about Kyle standing in the office right now, holding the logbook, staring at the entry that doesn't make sense, fighting the compulsion to fix it. To cross out my number and write the real one. To run the correction protocol. To make the record clean. If he corrects it, if he takes his magnet and his pencil and his careful, meticulous, newly certified professionalism and makes the data right. Then the record is clean again. The system has no corrupted input. The observation is complete, and it will be day 1 again. The hum will start, the chair will warm, the coffee will make itself. And Kyle Parcher, who is 26 years old and red-cheeked and still proud of his observer credential, will write his name in a logbook that will write his name back. If he leaves it, if he can bring himself to walk away from a wrong number in an official record, which goes against every instinct and every hour of training and every fiber of what it means to be the kind of person who takes weather observations on a mountaintop alone, then the system stays broken. The corrupted data stays in the record like a cracked tooth in a gear. The machine can't run smooth. Day 2 holds, and the next storm will be just a storm. I don't know which he'll choose. I couldn't stay to find out. Because if I stayed, if I watched him decide, I would be observing again, and the station still knows my name. I pulled back onto the highway. I drove south down the pass through the switchbacks, past the Branham Creek Junction, into the valley where the snow was lighter and the sky was brighter, and the road was plowed and salted and full of other cars driven by other people on their way to places that existed whether anyone was keeping a record of them or not. I drove toward Whitehall, toward Copper Street, toward a house where no one was waiting, because I'd spent 14 years making sure nobody had a reason to wait. But I had Ellen's number in my phone, and the signal was getting stronger with every mile I descended. And somewhere behind me at the top of Halloran Pass, in a concrete block building at 7,847 feet above sea level, a young man with a new credential and a good heart and exactly the wrong kind of attention was standing over a logbook with a pen in his hand, trying to decide whether to fix a number that was wrong on purpose. I hope he leaves it. I hope he's not too careful. I hope he's not like me.